The blood on my knuckles hadn't even dried when I got the call that would destroy everything I thought I knew about protecting my family. 3 hours earlier, I'd eliminated a target in downtown Chicago. Clean, precise, professional. Just another contract for a man who'd spent 15 years in special forces before turning his skills into something more profitable. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what my 17-year-old daughter Alexis would tell me when I walked through our front door. "Dad, I need to tell you something." Her voice was shaking. My little girl, who used to braid flowers in her hair, was sitting at our kitchen table with tears streaming down her face and a diamond ring on her finger that looked like it cost more than most people's houses. "What is this?" I asked, my trained eyes immediately scanning for threats, for danger, for anything that might explain the terror in her eyes. "Vincent Marcelli wants to marry me. He says it's already decided." Vincent Marcelli. The name hit me like a sniper's bullet to the chest. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. Mafia boss. Untouchable. Ruthless. And apparently, completely unaware that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Welcome to Betrayal Stories Lab. Your support means everything to us. We'd love to know which geographical location you are joining from today. Share with us now. Let's continue. My daughter's words echoed in my head as I stared at the massive engagement ring on her trembling finger. Vincent Marcelli, the most dangerous man in Chicago, and he wanted my baby girl. How did this happen, Alexis? I kept my voice steady, controlled, the same tone I'd used when interrogating enemy combatants. But inside, every protective instinct I'd ever developed was screaming. "He came to my school last week," she whispered. "Just showed up during lunch. His men surrounded our table, and he sat down like he owned the place. He said I was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. Said he was going to make me his wife." I felt my jaw clench. "Did you tell him no?" "I tried, Dad. I really tried. But he just smiled and said it wasn't a request. Then he showed me pictures." "What kind of pictures?" Her hands were shaking now. "Pictures of our house. Of you coming home from work. Of me walking to school. He said he'd been watching us for months. He said if I didn't agree, things would get complicated." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. In my line of work, I'd learned to recognize threats. This wasn't just some rich man's obsession. This was a predator who'd been stalking my family, planning this moment, waiting for the perfect time to strike. "Where is he now?" I asked. "He's giving me 3 days to plan the engagement party. He wants it to be special." She looked up at me with eyes that reminded me so much of her mother, the woman I'd lost to cancer 5 years ago, the woman who'd made me promise to always protect our daughter. I'd failed at a lot of things in my life. I'd seen good men die in foreign countries. I'd taken contracts that kept me awake at night. But I'd never failed at being a father. And I wasn't about to start now. "Alexis, I need you to listen to me very carefully," I said, moving to sit across from her. "Vincent Marcelli thinks he's dealing with some ordinary father. Some accountant or salesman who'll roll over and let him take what he wants." She looked confused. "Dad, what are you talking about?" I'd never told my daughter what I really did for a living. She thought I was a security consultant, which wasn't entirely a lie. I just never mentioned that my clients were usually very wealthy people who needed their problems to disappear. "He doesn't know who he's messing with, sweetheart. And that's going to be his biggest mistake." The fear in her eyes was slowly being replaced by something else. Hope, maybe. Or curiosity. "What are we going to do?" I reached across the table and took her hands in mine. The same hands that had ended 17 lives in the past 2 years. But when I held my daughter's hands, they were just the hands of a father who would burn the world down to keep her safe. "We're going to give Vincent Marcelli exactly what he's asking for," I said quietly. "A wedding he'll never forget." The next morning, I drove through Chicago's South Side with a different purpose than usual. Instead of heading to meet a client about eliminating their problem, I was gathering intelligence on Vincent Marcelli, the man who'd just become my biggest target. My contact at the FBI, Agent Rodriguez, owed me 3 favors from my military days. Time to collect. Jake Morrison. he said when I walked into the coffee shop on Michigan Avenue. Didn't expect to see you again so soon after the Henderson job. I need everything you have on Vincent Marcelli. Rodriguez's expression shifted immediately. Jesus, Jake. What did you get yourself into? He's coming after my family. That was all I needed to say. Rodriguez had seen what happened to people who threaten the families of men like me. He pulled out a thick manila folder and slid it across the table. Marcelli's been untouchable for 8 years, he said quietly. Runs everything from the docks to half the politicians in this city. But there's something you should know. He's got a weakness. I'm listening. His younger brother, Tony. Kid's got a gambling problem that's gotten him in deep with some very dangerous people. Marcelli's been paying off his debts for months, but Tony keeps digging deeper. I memorized every detail in that file. Marcelli's routine, his security detail, his business operations. But most importantly, his family structure. In my experience, the most powerful men always had the most vulnerable pressure points. That afternoon, I drove to Lincoln Park where Alexis was supposed to meet her friends. Instead, I watched from a distance as a black sedan followed her every movement. Marcelli's surveillance team, 3 men who clearly thought they were invisible. They weren't. I spent the next 6 hours learning their patterns, their shift changes, their communication methods. By sunset, I knew more about their operation than they probably knew about themselves. That evening, I sat Alexis down for another conversation. I need you to do something for me, and it's going to be hard, I said. I need you to call Vincent and tell him you want to move the engagement party up. Tell him you can't wait any longer. Dad, what are you planning? The less you know, the safer you'll be. But I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that? She nodded, though I could see the fear creeping back into her eyes. There's something else. I need you to ask him about having the party at the Riverside Manor. Tell him you've always dreamed of getting married there. But that's where Mom and you, I know exactly where it is, sweetheart. That's the point. The Riverside Manor sat on 43 acres of isolated property along the Chicago River. Multiple exit points, limited sight lines for snipers, and most importantly, I'd spent 2 weeks there 5 years ago eliminating a corrupt judge who'd been selling verdicts to the highest bidder. I knew every inch of that property. Alexis made the call while I listened from the kitchen. Her performance was perfect. Nervous excitement mixed with just enough desperation to make Marcelli believe he'd broken her spirit. He said yes, she reported after hanging up. The party's tomorrow night at 8. He sounded pleased that I was being so cooperative. Good girl. Now I need you to pack a bag and stay at your Aunt Caroline's tonight. I'm not leaving you alone with this. You're not leaving me alone. You're giving me the freedom to do what I do best without worrying about collateral damage. That night, after Alexis left for her aunt's house, I opened the safe in my bedroom and began selecting my tools. The Sig Sauer P226, reliable, accurate, deadly quiet with the suppressor. The ceramic knife that wouldn't trigger metal detectors. The small vial of ricin I'd been saving for a special occasion. But more than weapons, I needed information. And there was only one way to get close enough to Vincent Marcelli to learn what I really needed to know. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years. Tommy Chun, the voice answered. It's Morrison. I need a favor. Tommy had been my weapons specialist in Afghanistan before he got discharged for selling military equipment on the black market. Now he ran a legitimate restaurant that served as a front for less legitimate activities. Jake Morrison. Heard you were doing private contracts now. I need an in with the Marcelli family. Tonight. That's not a favor. That's suicide. Tommy, they've got my daughter. The line went silent for a long moment. Then, there's a poker game tonight in Chinatown. High stakes. Marcelli's nephew Danny will be there. The one who thinks he's smarter than his uncle. You want in? Send me the address. As I hung up, I realized this was exactly what Marcelli had never anticipated. He'd done his research on Jake Morrison the father, Jake Morrison the security consultant. But he'd never looked deep enough to find Jake Morrison the ghost, the man who'd spent 15 years learning how to make powerful men disappear without a trace. Tomorrow night, Vincent Marcelli would discover that some fathers don't negotiate. They eliminate. The poker game in Chinatown was exactly what I needed, a direct line to the Marcelli family through their weakest link. Danny Marcelli sat across from me at the underground table, 22 years old and drowning in debt he couldn't pay. His hands shook every time he reached for his chips. Perfect. You're new, he said, trying to sound tough while losing another hand. Jake Morrison. I heard this was where serious players come to test their luck. Within 2 hours, I'd let Danny win enough hands to make him comfortable, then systematically destroyed his confidence. By midnight, he owed me $47,000 he didn't have. I need more time, he stammered as the other players left. Time's expensive, Danny, but maybe we can work something out. His eyes lit up with desperate hope. What kind of arrangement? I hear your uncle's throwing an engagement party tomorrow night. I'm in the security business. Maybe I could provide some extra protection, and we call it even. Danny's relief was pathetic. Yeah. Uncle Vincent always needs more security. Especially tomorrow. He's paranoid about the girl's father trying something stupid. If only he knew. Tell him Jake Morrison comes highly recommended. Former military, very discreet. The next evening, I stood in the Riverside Manor wearing a black suit and earpiece, looking exactly like every other security contractor Vincent Marcelli had hired. Except I knew this property better than any of them. Alexis arrived at 7:30 in a white dress that made her look even younger than 17. When she saw me positioned near the main entrance, her eyes widened slightly, but she kept walking. Smart girl. Vincent Marcelli made his entrance at 8 sharp. 53 years old, silver hair, expensive suit that couldn't hide the predator underneath. He moved through the room like he owned everything and everyone in it. Beautiful evening for a celebration, he said, approaching Alexis at the center of the ballroom. His hand touched her waist possessively, and I watched my daughter's body stiffen. That touch just signed his death warrant. Mr. Marcelli, one of his lieutenants, approached. The new security contractor you requested is here. Jake Morrison. Vincent barely glanced in my direction. Good. Make sure he knows to stay invisible tonight. Invisible. Exactly where I wanted to be. For the next hour, I memorized every detail. Marcelli's personal bodyguard never left his right side. His driver stayed positioned near the rear exit. Most importantly, Vincent had developed a pattern. Every 20 minutes, he stepped onto the balcony overlooking the river to smoke a cigarette. Alone. At 9:40, I made my move. Sir, I approached the bodyguard. There's a situation with the perimeter sensors. Need you to check the east entrance. Military training recognizes military training. He didn't question my authority, just nodded and headed toward the false alarm I'd created using the manor's old security system. Vincent stepped onto the balcony right on schedule, cigarette already between his lips. Vincent Marcelli, I said quietly, stepping out behind him. He turned, mildly annoyed. Who the hell are you? I'm the father of the girl you're trying to buy. His expression shifted from annoyance to amusement. Ah, the security consultant. Danny said you were military. Should have done better research. Morrison, you're about to make a very expensive mistake. The mistake was yours, Vincent. You see, you investigated Jake Morrison the father, but you never looked into Jake Morrison the professional. Something in my tone made him step backward. Too late. You want to know what I do for a living, Vincent? I solve problems. Permanently. 17 contracts in 2 years. Each one a man who thought he was untouchable. His hand moved toward his jacket, but 15 years of special forces training doesn't disappear. My ceramic knife was against his throat before he could blink. Here's what's going to happen, I whispered. You're going to walk back into that party, announce that you've changed your mind about marrying my daughter, and then you're going to disappear from our lives forever. You have no idea who you're threatening. Vincent, in Afghanistan, I eliminated a Taliban commander surrounded by 50 armed men. You've got 6 security guards and a gambling-addicted nephew. This isn't a threat. It's a courtesy warning. My family will hunt you down. Your family doesn't know what I'm capable of, but they're about to learn. I pressed the blade just deep enough to draw blood. 30 seconds, Vincent. Make your choice. Vincent's eyes calculated his odds for exactly 3 seconds before reality hit him. The blade at his throat belonged to someone who'd done this before. You're insane if you think I'll just walk away, he hissed. Then you're dead if you think I won't finish this right now. But Vincent Marcelli hadn't survived 8 years running Chicago's underworld by being stupid. He raised his hand slowly. What do you want? Walk back inside. Tell everyone the engagement is off. Make it believable. And then you pray I never see you near my daughter again. We walked back into the ballroom together, my hand resting casually on his shoulder like we were old friends. To everyone else, it looked like a friendly conversation. Only Vincent could feel the ceramic blade pressed against his spine. Ladies and gentlemen, Vincent announced, his voice steady despite the sweat on his forehead. I have an announcement. The room fell silent. Alexis looked up from across the ballroom, her face pale with fear. After much consideration, I've decided that Alexis and we're moving too fast. The engagement is postponed indefinitely. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Vincent's lieutenant stepped forward, confused. Boss, the decision is final, Vincent cut him off. Everyone can go home. As the guests began filing out, Vincent turned to me with cold fury in his eyes. This isn't over, Morrison. It is if you're smart. But I could already see in his expression that Vincent Marcelli wasn't going to be smart about this. 20 minutes later, Alexis and I sat in my truck driving toward her aunt's house. The engagement ring was in a trash can back at the manor. Dad, how did you make him back down? Sometimes men like Vincent respond better to a language they understand. What language is that? Fear. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, this isn't really over, is it? I looked at my 17-year-old daughter, too young to understand the world I lived in, but old enough to recognize when that world was about to crash into hers. No, sweetheart. It's not over. The next morning confirmed what I already knew. Tommy Chin called at 6 a.m. Jake, you need to disappear. Vincent's put a $50,000 contract on your head. Half the city's looking for you. What about my daughter? He's not touching her yet. But word is, he's planning something bigger. Something that'll make you suffer before he kills you. I hung up and immediately called Agent Rodriguez. Jake, what the hell did you do? Vincent Marcelli's calling in every favor he has. Says you threatened him at his own engagement party. He was forcing my 17-year-old daughter to marry him. Jesus. Okay, look, I can't protect you officially. But there's something else. We've been tracking unusual movement in Vincent's organization. Large cash withdrawals, meetings with out-of-state contractors. He's planning something big. How big? The kind that involves making examples out of people who cross him. That afternoon, I was loading ammunition into my Sig Sauer when Alexis walked into the garage. You're leaving, aren't you? Just for a few days. Until I can figure out how to handle this permanently. Dad, I'm scared. I set down the weapon and pulled her into a hug. Vincent made a mistake last night. He showed me that he's not as untouchable as everyone thinks. Men like him, they depend on fear and reputation. But when someone isn't afraid of them anymore, what happens? They make desperate decisions. And desperate men make mistakes. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your daughter looks beautiful when she sleeps. Third window from the left, blue curtains. Sweet dreams, Morrison. The blood drained from my face as I read it twice. What's wrong? Alexis asked. I looked at my daughter, my only family, the one person in the world I'd die to protect, and realized Vincent Marcelli had just escalated this war beyond anything I'd anticipated. Pack a bag. Right now? We're leaving. Where are we going? Somewhere Vincent Marcelli will never think to look for us. As we threw clothes into suitcases, I was already planning phase 2. Vincent wanted a war. He was about to discover that some men don't just fight wars. They end them. We drove for 6 hours straight to a cabin in northern Wisconsin that officially didn't exist. I'd bought the property under 3 different shell companies after my first contract killing. Insurance for the day someone would come looking for Jake Morrison. That day had arrived. Dad, whose place is this? Alexis asked as we pulled up to the isolated cabin surrounded by dense forest. Mine. But on paper, it belongs to a dead man. The cabin had everything I needed: clean water, solar power, weapons cache, and most importantly, no digital footprint that could lead Vincent's people to us. But hiding wasn't the plan. Hiding was just preparation. That night, after Alexis fell asleep, I made a call to the one person who could give me what I needed most: information about Vincent's next move. Sophia Reeves, the voice answered. Sophia had been Vincent's accountant for 3 years before she discovered he was laundering money through children's charities. She tried to quit. Vincent tried to kill her. I'd saved her life and helped her disappear. Now she owed me. It's Morrison. I need to know what Vincent's planning. Jake? Jesus, I heard he put a contract on you. Where are you? Safe. What's he planning, Sophia? Something's changed. 2 days ago, he moved $8 million through offshore accounts. That's execution money, Jake. He's not just hiring local muscle anymore. Who's he bringing in? Eastern Europeans. The kind who specialize in making people disappear slowly. But there's something else. He's also been meeting with city officials. Permits, licenses, something about a construction project. My blood ran cold. What kind of construction? Demolition permits for the old Morrison Electronics building on State Street. Morrison Electronics. The small business my late wife had inherited from her father. The building had been empty for years, but it was still in Alexis's name. Vincent wasn't just planning to kill me. He was planning to erase every trace of my family's legacy. Sophia, I need you to do something for me. Name it. There's a safe deposit box at First National Bank under the name James Mitchell. Inside, you'll find documents that prove Vincent's been skimming money from his own family's operations. Get those documents to Agent Rodriguez at the FBI. What are you planning, Jake? Insurance. The next morning, I began teaching Alexis things no 17-year-old should ever need to know. This is a Glock 19, I said, placing the weapon on the cabin's kitchen table. 15 rounds, simple to operate, reliable. Dad, I don't want to. Vincent's not going to stop, sweetheart. He can't. Last night, he crossed a line that means this ends one of 2 ways. Either he dies, or we do. Her hands shook as I showed her the proper grip, the safety mechanism, how to aim for center mass. I need you to understand something, I continued. If something happens to me, you don't try to be a hero. You run. There's $50,000 cash hidden in the floor panel under your bed, and passport with a new identity. You disappear, and you never look back. Nothing's going to happen to you. Maybe not. But Vincent Marcelli just declared war on our family. And in war, you prepare for every possibility. That afternoon, my phone rang. Vincent's voice was calm, almost friendly. Hello, Jake. Enjoying your little vacation? What do you want, Vincent? I want you to understand something. I've been thinking about our conversation at the manor, and I've realized you were right about one thing. I didn't do enough research on Jake Morrison. Meaning I know about the Henderson contract, the judge in Milwaukee, the arms dealer in Detroit. Very impressive work, Jake. Very professional. My grip tightened on the phone. If Vincent knew about my contracts, he'd done deeper research than I'd anticipated. So here's my offer, he continued. You come back to Chicago. We sit down like civilized men. Maybe we can work something out. And if I refuse, then tomorrow morning, every law enforcement agency in 3 states gets an anonymous tip about Jake Morrison, professional assassin, complete with photographs, dates, and enough evidence to put you on death row. The line went quiet except for my heartbeat pounding in my ears. 48 hours, Jake. Chicago. Or I destroy your life and take your daughter anyway. He hung up, leaving me staring at the phone and realizing Vincent Marcelli had just played the one card I'd never anticipated. I stared at the dead phone in my hand, Vincent's ultimatum echoing in my head. 48 hours. Return to Chicago and face whatever trap he'd prepared, or watch my entire life get destroyed by evidence that would put me on death row. But Vincent had made one critical mistake. He assumed I was the same man who'd been hiding in shadows for 2 years, taking contracts and staying invisible. He didn't understand that threatening my daughter had awakened something much more dangerous than a professional killer. He'd awakened a father with nothing left to lose. "Dad." Alexis stood in the doorway, her face pale. "I heard you talking." "What did he say?" I looked at my 17-year-old daughter and made a decision that would either save us both or get us killed. "He wants me to come back to Chicago." "That's suicide." "Maybe. Or maybe it's exactly what we need." I walked to the cabin's main room and spread out a detailed map of Chicago on the wooden table. Next to it, I placed photographs of Vincent's businesses, his home, his regular haunts, intelligence I'd been gathering for 3 days. "Vincent thinks he's forcing me into a corner," I said, marking locations with a red pen. "But cornered animals are the most dangerous kind. What are you planning?" "Vincent's entire operation depends on fear and control. He rules through intimidation because nobody's ever challenged him directly. But what happens when someone who isn't afraid decides to dismantle everything he's built?" I pulled out my laptop and showed Alexis financial records I'd been analyzing. "Look at this. Vincent's businesses are all connected. The restaurants launder money for the drug operations. The construction company provides muscle for the loan sharking. The garbage collection gives him access to dispose of evidence. It's a perfect system." "Okay, but how does that help us?" "Because perfect systems have perfect vulnerabilities. You remove one piece, the whole thing collapses." I pointed to a circled location on the map. "Tomorrow night is the monthly meeting of Vincent's inner circle. All his lieutenants, his accountant, his lawyer, everyone who keeps his empire running. They meet at Torino's restaurant on the north side. You can't take on all of them." "I'm not going to take them on, sweetheart. I'm going to make them take each other on." I opened another file on the laptop, recordings I'd obtained through Sophia. 3 months ago, Vincent's brother Tony borrowed $2 million from the family accounts to pay gambling debts. Vincent doesn't know, but his accountant Marco does, and he's been skimming money to cover it up. Alexis leaned closer, starting to understand. At the same time, Vincent's top lieutenant, Carlos, has been selling information to rival families about shipment schedules. And Vincent's lawyer has been cooperating with the FBI for 8 months in exchange for immunity. They're all betraying each other. They're all terrified of Vincent, so they've been keeping their betrayals secret. But tomorrow night, I'm going to make sure all those secrets come out at once. I showed her the final piece of my plan: audio recordings, financial documents, photographs, all organized into separate envelopes. Each envelope contains evidence of someone else's betrayal. When they're all sitting around that table tomorrow night, trusting each other, these envelopes are going to be delivered simultaneously. How? Vincent's security team changes shifts at 9 p.m. for exactly 4 minutes. There's a gap in coverage at the restaurant's rear entrance. I'm going to use those 4 minutes to plant evidence in each of their cars, briefcases, and phones. Alexis stared at the plan spread across the table. "This is insane. This is warfare, sweetheart. But not the kind Vincent expects." The next evening, I drove back toward Chicago with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't about contracts or money anymore. This was about a father protecting his family from a predator who'd made the mistake of threatening everything I cared about. At 8:45 p.m., I parked 3 blocks from Torino's restaurant and began the most important mission of my life. The restaurant sat on a busy corner, Vincent's black Escalade parked directly in front with 2 guards smoking cigarettes nearby. But I'd studied this location for hours: the alley behind the building, the service entrance, the precise timing of their security rotation. At exactly 9 p.m., I watched the evening security team leave and the night shift approach from the opposite direction. For minutes, that's all I had. I moved through the alley like a ghost, muscle memory from 15 years of Special Forces operations guiding every step. The service door was locked, but locks were just another obstacle I'd been trained to overcome. Inside the restaurant's storage room, I could hear voices from the dining room. Vincent's voice, commanding and confident, completely unaware that his empire was about to implode. The first envelope went into Marco's briefcase, financial records showing Tony's gambling debts and Marco's cover-up, along with evidence that Vincent had been planning to eliminate Marco once he discovered the theft. The second envelope went into Carlos's jacket pocket, transcripts of his conversations with rival families, plus photographs of him meeting with FBI agents. The third envelope I placed directly on Vincent's chair, documentation of his lawyer's cooperation with federal investigators, complete with recorded conversations and a list of charges the FBI was preparing. But the fourth envelope was special. This one I hand-delivered. I walked directly into the private dining room where 8 of Chicago's most dangerous men sat around a mahogany table, discussing territory and murder like they were planning a birthday party. "Gentlemen," I said calmly, stepping into the light. Every gun in the room was aimed at me within seconds, but I kept my hands visible and my voice steady. "Vincent, I got your message. 48 hours, you said. I'm here early." Vincent's face went through several emotions: surprise, anger, calculation, before settling on cold fury. "Jake Morrison, I have to admit, I didn't expect you to just walk in here. That's because you still don't understand who you're dealing with." I pulled out the final envelope and placed it on the table. "But you're about to." Vincent reached for the envelope, and I smiled. The same smile I'd worn in Afghanistan right before eliminating high-value targets. "Go ahead, Vincent. Open it. But I should warn you, once you read what's inside, everything changes." His hands hesitated over the envelope, and in that moment of uncertainty, I knew I had him exactly where I wanted him. "What is this, Morrison?" "It's the truth about your family, Vincent. The truth about the people sitting at this table. The truth about why you're already dead. You just don't know it yet." Vincent's fingers trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. The confident crime boss who'd terrorized Chicago for 8 years was about to discover that his empire had been rotting from the inside. The first document he pulled out was a bank statement showing $2 million missing from the family accounts. His eyes went immediately to his brother Tony, who'd gone completely pale. "Tony." Vincent's voice was dangerously quiet. "What is this?" "Vincent, I can explain. $2 million, Tony. From our mother's memorial fund." The room was dead silent except for the sound of Vincent's breathing getting heavier. But I wasn't finished. "Keep reading, Vincent." The second document was a transcript of a phone conversation between Carlos and Vincent's biggest rival, Domenico Torino. Carlos had been selling information about weapon shipments for 6 months. Vincent's head snapped toward Carlos, who was already reaching for his gun. "Nobody moves," Vincent snarled. "Carlos, you son of a bitch." "Vincent, listen to me. Shut up. All of you, shut up." But the third document was the one that would destroy everything. It was a signed cooperation agreement between Vincent's lawyer, Stephen Walsh, and the FBI, complete with a list of crimes Stephen was prepared to testify about in exchange for immunity. "Stephen," Vincent's voice was barely above a whisper. "Tell me this is fake." Stephen Walsh, who'd been Vincent's most trusted advisor for 12 years, couldn't even look him in the eye. "Vincent, they had evidence. They were going to charge me with conspiracy. You've been wearing a wire." "How long, Stephen?" 8 months. Vincent stood up, so fast his chair flew backward. 8 months. 8 goddamn months you've been recording everything we've said in this room. "Vincent, please." The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Stephen Walsh slumped forward onto the table, blood pooling around the financial documents. Chaos erupted. Tony dove for cover behind his chair. Carlos pulled his weapon, but Marco was faster, putting 2 bullets in Carlos's chest before he could aim. Vincent was screaming orders that nobody was following because everyone was too busy trying to survive. This was exactly what I'd planned. While Vincent's organization tore itself apart, I calmly walked to the restaurant's bar and poured myself a whiskey. Through the doorway, I could see Vincent standing over Stephen's body, his gun smoking in his hand. "Morrison," he roared. "You did this. You orchestrated all of this." "I didn't orchestrate anything, Vincent." I just revealed what was already there. Vincent stormed into the bar area, his remaining men following behind him. Tony cowering, Marco bleeding from a graze on his arm, and two bodyguards who looked like they were reconsidering their career choices. You think you're clever? You think destroying my inner circle means you've won? I think you missed the point entirely. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. It was live streaming everything that had just happened to 3 different FBI servers. What the hell? Agent Rodriguez has been watching this whole meeting through hidden cameras I installed while you were reading those documents. Congratulations, Vincent. You just murdered your lawyer and destroyed your organization on federal surveillance video. Vincent's face went through several shades of red before settling on a rage so pure it was almost beautiful. You're dead, Morrison. You and your daughter are both dead. Actually, Vincent, there's something else you should know about my daughter. I set down my whiskey and looked directly into his eyes. Alexis isn't hiding in some cabin in Wisconsin. She's not running scared from the big bad Mafia boss. She's sitting in Agent Rodriguez's office right now, giving a full statement about everything you did to her. The threats, the forced engagement, the surveillance of our home. Impossible. She's also providing testimony about what she witnessed tonight through the same surveillance system. A 17-year-old girl watching you murder a man in cold blood because he was cooperating with law enforcement. Vincent raised his gun toward my head, but I didn't move. You see, Vincent, you made one crucial mistake from the very beginning. You assumed this was about power, about territory, about respect. But this was never about any of that. What was it about then? It was about a father teaching his daughter that no man, no matter how powerful, how dangerous, how untouchable he thinks he is, gets to decide what happens to her life. Police sirens were getting closer. The sound made Tony jump, but Vincent's hand stayed steady on his weapon. We can still leave, Tony whispered. The back exit is surrounded by federal agents. I finished. Has been for the past 20 minutes. Vincent's empire was over. His inner circle was dead or bleeding. His crimes were recorded on federal surveillance equipment. And in 30 seconds, he'd be in federal custody. But he still had his gun pointed at my head. You know what the beautiful part is, Vincent? I said, finishing my whiskey. Even if you pull that trigger, it doesn't change anything. My daughter is safe. Your organization is destroyed. Every federal agency in 3 states has enough evidence to put your entire family away for life. At least you'll be dead. Maybe. But Alexis will grow up free. She'll go to college, fall in love with someone who deserves her, have children of her own. She'll live the life you try to steal from her. The restaurant's front door exploded inward as FBI agents flooded the building. Vincent Marcelli, drop your weapon. Vincent's eyes never left mine. In them, I could see 8 years of absolute power crumbling into nothing. The untouchable crime boss was just a man who'd lost everything because he'd threatened the wrong father's daughter. This isn't over, Morrison. Yes, Vincent. It is. Agent Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, his weapon drawn, 6 federal agents behind him. Drop the gun, Marcelli. Now, Vincent looked at his dead lawyer, his bleeding nephew, his destroyed organization, and the federal agents surrounding him. Then he looked back at me. You should have just let me have her. I should have killed you the moment you touched my daughter. Vincent Marcelli, the most feared man in Chicago, slowly placed his gun on the bar and raised his hands. As the FBI cuffed him and read his rights, he looked at me one last time. This was all for her. Everything I've ever done has been for her. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Vincent Marcelli finally understood exactly who he'd been dealing with. 3 hours later, I sat in Agent Rodriguez's office watching Vincent Marcelli's mugshot being processed into the federal system. Murder in the first degree, racketeering, extortion, conspiracy. Enough charges to guarantee he'd never see the outside of a federal prison. Your daughter's testimony was incredibly brave, Rodriguez said, sliding a cup of coffee across his desk. She held up perfectly under questioning. Where is she now? Safe house. We'll need her to testify at trial, but for now, she's protected. I nodded. but my mind was already moving to the next problem. Vincent might be in custody, but his family was still out there. The Marcelli organization had been wounded, not destroyed. What about the rest of them? Tony's cooperating, scared out of his mind, and willing to testify against anyone we put in front of him. Marco's in surgery. He'll live, and he's already asking for a deal. That's not what I meant. Rodriguez understood. Vincent's older brother, Sal, is flying in from Vegas. Word is, he's not happy about what happened to the Chicago operation. Meaning he's got questions about how his brother's empire got dismantled by one man in a single night. I leaned back in the chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 42 years. I'd eliminated Vincent, but the Marcelli family tree had deeper roots than I'd anticipated. How long do I have? Sal lands tomorrow morning. But Jake, there's something else. We found evidence that Vincent had already put contracts out on both you and Alexis. Professional killers from 3 different organizations. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. How many? 6 confirmed. They don't know Vincent's been arrested yet. As far as they're concerned, those contracts are still active. I stood up and walked to the window overlooking downtown Chicago. Somewhere out there, 6 professional killers were hunting my daughter and me. And Vincent's arrest had just made us bigger targets. I need to see Alexis. Jake, the safe house is not safe enough. Not anymore. Rodriguez studied my face for a long moment. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to finish what Vincent started. An hour later, I stood outside a nondescript apartment building on Chicago's west side. The safe house was on the 3rd floor, 2 FBI agents in the lobby, 2 more in the hallway, cameras on every entrance. Standard protection that wouldn't stop someone with my skill set for more than 30 minutes. Alexis ran into my arms the moment I walked through the door. Dad, Agent Martinez said Vincent was arrested. Is it over? I held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling her heartbeat against my chest. My daughter. Safe for now, but not for long. Vincent's in custody, I said carefully. But his family is still out there. What does that mean? It means we need to disappear for a while. Agent Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s, stepped forward. Mr. Morrison, we can provide long-term protection. With respect, Agent Martinez, federal protection won't stop what's coming. What exactly is coming? I pulled out my phone and showed her photographs I'd taken of 3 suspicious vehicles that had been circling the safe house for the past hour. Professional killers who don't care about federal agents or safe houses. They care about completing contracts and collecting money. Martinez's expression shifted immediately. She grabbed her radio. Control, this is Martinez. I need immediate backup at location 7. Possible hostile surveillance. Too late, I said quietly. Through the apartment's front window, I could see movement in the building across the street. Muzzle flashes. The distinctive crack of high-powered rifle fire. The window behind Agent Martinez exploded inward. Everyone down, I yelled, pulling Alexis behind the kitchen counter as bullets tore through the apartment. Martinez was already on her radio, calling for backup, but I knew backup wouldn't arrive in time. Professional killers didn't give you time to call for help. Dad, what's happening? Vincent's contracts are still active. 6 killers, probably coordinated attack, multiple entry points. I could hear boots on the stairs. Heavy, tactical, moving fast. They'd taken out the FBI agents in the lobby and were coming for us. Kitchen window, I told Martinez. Fire escape. Now. We can't leave. Backup is 3 minutes out. We won't be alive in 3 minutes. The front door exploded off its hinges. Smoke grenades rolled into the apartment, filling the air with thick gray clouds that burned my eyes and throat. Through the smoke, I could see the tactical team moving with military precision. These weren't street thugs or desperate amateurs. These were professionals who'd done this before. I grabbed Alexis's hand and moved toward the kitchen window, but gunfire erupted from the fire escape. They'd covered that exit too. We were trapped. Bathroom, I whispered to Martinez. Is there another way out? Ventilation shaft to the roof. But it's narrow. Alexis can fit. I looked at my daughter, who was pressed against the kitchen counter with terror in her eyes. Sweetheart, I need you to listen very carefully. You're going to crawl through that ventilation shaft to the roof. Agent Martinez will go with you. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. Because if something happens to me, you're the only one left who can testify against Vincent. You're the only one who can make sure he never hurts another family. Tears were streaming down her face, but she nodded. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. Now go. Martinez helped boost Alexis into the ventilation shaft just as the tactical team cleared the smoke and spotted our position. Time slowed down the way it always did in combat. 6 men, automatic weapons, coordinated movement. They were good. But I'd spent 15 years fighting men who were just as good. And I was fighting for something they couldn't understand. I was fighting for my daughter's future. The first tactical operative came around the kitchen counter expecting to find a panicked father hiding with his daughter. Instead, he found Jake Morrison, 15 years Special Forces, 2 years professional assassin, waiting with a ceramic knife and nothing left to lose. The blade went between his ribs before he could raise his weapon. I caught his rifle as he fell, rolled behind the refrigerator, and put 3 rounds into the second man before he understood what was happening. Target is armed and trained, someone shouted through the smoke. Military background confirmed. Military background. They had no idea. The apartment layout worked in my favor. Narrow hallways, multiple corners, limited sight lines. In close quarters combat, superior numbers didn't always win. Experience did. And desperation. I moved through the smoke like a ghost, using sound and muzzle flashes to track their positions. Third man down with a shot to the head as he tried to flank through the bedroom. Fourth man caught a grenade I'd taken from the first operative. His own equipment turned against him. But the fifth man was smarter. He'd positioned himself near the front door, cutting off my primary escape route, and he was using thermal imaging to track my heat signature through the smoke. I could hear him breathing, controlled and steady. Professional. Morrison, his voice was calm, almost conversational. Vincent Marcelli sends his regards. Vincent's in federal custody. Contract was paid in advance. Nothing personal. I caught a glimpse of his thermal scope through the dissipating smoke. Military grade. Expensive. This wasn't just a hired gun. This was someone with serious training and serious equipment. Your daughter's in the ventilation shaft, he continued. My partner's already on the roof. My blood went cold. Alexis was supposed to be safe once she reached the roof. If they had someone waiting, you've got maybe 60 seconds before he finds her. But we can make a deal. I'm listening. You surrender, I make it quick. Clean headshot, no suffering. Your daughter gets to live. Through the smoke, I could hear scratching sounds from above, movement in the ventilation system. Alexis was still crawling toward the roof, unaware that someone was waiting for her. 30 seconds, Morrison. What's it going to be? I closed my eyes and made the hardest decision of my life. Deal, I said, stepping out from behind cover with my hands raised. The thermal scope tracked me immediately. Through the smoke, I could see the red dot of his laser sight centered on my forehead. Smart choice. Your daughter will thank you. She'll never know what happened here. Sure she will. Right before my partner kills her too. The laser sight never wavered, but I was counting on something he didn't know about. The sixth man. I'd only seen 5 operatives enter the apartment. In a professional kill team, 6 meant 1 stayed outside as Overwatch. But I'd been tracking sounds for the past 3 minutes, and the 6th man wasn't outside. He was above us. The ceiling tile directly over the thermal scope operator fell just as I dove sideways. Agent Martinez dropped through the opening, landing on the 5th man with her service weapon already firing. The 6th operative had been Martinez all along. Federal agent, she screamed, putting 2 rounds center mass into the confused killer. Drop your weapons. But there was no one left to drop anything. 5 men were dead. The 6th was bleeding out on the apartment floor, and the smoke was finally clearing enough to see the destruction. Alexis. I called up toward the ventilation shaft. Dad? Is it over? It's over, sweetheart. Come down. As my daughter crawled back through the shaft, I looked at Agent Martinez with new understanding. How long have you been undercover in Vincent's organization? 18 months. We've been building a case against the entire Marcelli family, but we needed someone to force them into making mistakes. You used me. We used your situation. When Vincent threatened your daughter, we saw an opportunity to bring down his entire operation. Alexis dropped down from the ventilation shaft, her clothes torn and dirty, but otherwise unharmed. She looked around at the bodies scattered through the apartment. Dad, who were they? The last of Vincent's reach, I said, pulling her into a hug. The final contracts he'll ever put out. Agent Martinez was already on her radio, calling for cleanup crews and coroner vans. Control, this is Martinez. 6 hostiles down, no federal casualties. Safe house is secure. But I knew it wasn't really over. Not yet. What about Sal Marcelli? I asked. Sal's plane was turned around mid-flight. Seems the FAA received an anonymous tip about suspicious cargo. They found enough weapons to charge him with federal firearms violations. Anonymous tip? Agent Rodriguez has been busy while you were dealing with the hit squad. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This is Sal Marcelli. My brother is in federal prison because of you. This isn't over. I showed the message to Martinez, who just smiled. Actually, it is over. That text was sent from a federal holding cell in Vegas. Sal's been in custody for 2 hours. We just hadn't told him about Vincent yet. Then who sent this? We did. We wanted to see if there were any other family members or associates who might try to continue Vincent's vendetta. I stared at the phone, realizing the entire night had been orchestrated. The hit squad, the safe house attack, even Sal's arrest. All of it designed to flush out every remaining threat to my family. How many people were involved in this operation? Enough to make sure Vincent Marcelli's organization dies with him in federal prison. 3 hours later, I sat with Alexis in Agent Rodriguez's office, watching news reports about the biggest organized crime bust in Chicago's history. Vincent Marcelli, his brother Sal, and 17 associates were facing federal charges that would keep them in prison for the rest of their lives. What happens now? Alexis asked. Now we go home, I said. Vincent's contracts died with him. His organization is finished. His family is in federal custody. And you? What about your work? I looked at my 17-year-old daughter, the girl who'd survived a forced engagement to a Mafia boss, given testimony to federal agents, and crawled through ventilation shafts while professional killers tried to murder her family. She deserved better than a father who killed people for money. I'm retiring, I said quietly. Jake Morrison, the professional assassin, is finished. From now on, I'm just Jake Morrison, the father. Good, she said, taking my hand. That's all I've ever wanted you to be. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new house in Colorado, watching Alexis laugh on the phone with her college roommate. The sound filled spaces in my heart I didn't even know were empty. We'd moved here after the trials ended. Vincent Marcelli got life without parole. His brother Sal got 40 years. The organization that had terrorized Chicago for nearly a decade was nothing but case files and federal archives. But the real victory wasn't in their prison sentences. It was in moments like this, my daughter planning her freshman year at Colorado State, excited about studying psychology, talking about boys who deserved her attention, living the life Vincent had tried to steal. Dad, are you okay? Alexis asked, hanging up the phone. Just thinking. About what? I looked at the woman my little girl was becoming. Confident, strong, unbroken by everything we'd survived together. About lessons, I said quietly. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table where we'd shared so many conversations over the past months. Real conversations. Father and daughter conversations. Not the desperate planning sessions of 2 people fighting for survival. What kind of lessons? I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully because this might be the most important thing I'd ever say to her. For 15 years in Special Forces, I learned that power comes from strength, from being more dangerous than your enemies. Then for 2 years as a contractor, I thought power meant being invisible, untouchable, feared. And now I understand that real power, the kind that actually matters, comes from something completely different. What? Love. The willingness to sacrifice everything for the people who matter most. Vincent Marcelli had money, fear, respect, control over half of Chicago. But when it came down to it, none of that could protect him from a father who loved his daughter more than he feared dying. Alexis reached across the table and took my hand. Is that why you retired? I retired because I realized I'd been living my life backwards. I thought I needed to be dangerous to protect you. But the truth is, I needed to be present. I needed to be your father first, and everything else second. You were always my father first. No, sweetheart. I was Jake Morrison the soldier, Jake Morrison the killer, Jake Morrison the man who solved problems with violence. You deserved Jake Morrison the father who helped with homework, who knew your friends' names, who was there for ordinary Tuesday nights instead of just the crises. She was quiet for a long moment, processing words I should have said years earlier. Do you regret what happened with Vincent? I regret that it had to happen at all. But I'll never regret protecting you. That's what fathers do. We stand between our children and anything that wants to hurt them, no matter what it costs us. Even if it costs everything. Especially then. That evening, we sat on our back porch watching the sunset paint the Rocky Mountains in shades of gold and purple. Alexis was reading a psychology textbook for her summer prep classes. I was reading a cookbook, learning to make the kind of meals a father should know how to make. Simple moments. Ordinary moments. The most precious kind. Dad, Alexis said without looking up from her book. Yeah. Thank you. For what? For showing me what it looks like when someone loves you enough to fight the whole world if they have to. I closed my cookbook and looked at my daughter, brilliant, brave, beautiful, and completely safe for the first time in months. That's the thing about love, sweetheart. Real love doesn't negotiate. It doesn't compromise. It doesn't calculate odds or consider consequences. When someone threatens the people you love, you don't think about being reasonable or proportional or fair. You just act. You just act. The sun disappeared behind the mountains, leaving us in that peaceful twilight that exists between day and night, between who we used to be and who we're becoming. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Alexis. More than anything in this world. And sitting there in the gathering darkness, I understood the most important lesson of all. A man can spend his entire life accumulating power, wealth, respect, and fear. But in the end, the only thing that truly matters is whether the people he loves feel safe enough to laugh in his kitchen on ordinary Tuesday nights. Vincent Marcelli learned that lesson too late. I learned it just in time. The deepest truth this story teaches us is this. Real strength isn't measured by how much fear you can create, but by how much love you're willing to protect. A father's greatest weapon isn't his training or his skills. It's his willingness to become whatever his family needs him to be, even if it costs him everything else. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up for the people who matter most, not as the person the world expects you to be, but as the person they need you to be. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below.